What happens when a wife turns one wild night into a public joke and expects her husband to just accept it? How can a simple club clip, a late-night table dance, and a few flirtatious messages become the spark for a lawful ending? And why did he choose calm planning instead of fighting back? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Aven Mirelle, and everyone keeps saying I ruined my own marriage, but honestly, I still don't think what I did was that serious. People dance on tables all the time, especially after a long week and a couple of shots. But somehow, my little 2 a.m. moment turned into the reason my husband walked out the next morning. I keep replaying it in my head. The music, the lights, Marco cheering me on, everyone filming like it was all just harmless fun. I looked confident, alive, like the version of myself I used to be before Daniel started acting so serious about everything. So why am I suddenly the villain? Daniel didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just left a note on the counter, washed his mug, and walked out of the apartment like he was going to work on any normal day. Except he wasn't. He called his lawyer. People act like that makes him the reasonable one, like silence and paperwork make him some kind of hero. I think it just proves he never understood me at all. And now here I am, trying to explain how something that felt like freedom turned into consequences I never saw coming. I'm not proud of how the night started, but if I'm being honest, I still don't think it was worth the fallout that came after. That Friday had been dragging for hours, and by the time I shut down my computer at the office, I felt like the world owed me something loud and bright. My co-workers were going to the rooftop bar near the river, and I told Daniel I might join them for a quick drink. He asked if I wanted him to pick me up later. I said I'd figure it out. He said he hoped I wouldn't get home too late. I told him he was being dramatic again. The way his face tightened annoyed me, so I grabbed my bag and left before he could say anything else. The rooftop bar was packed, warm lights everywhere, music pulsing through the floorboards. People were laughing, leaning into each other, taking photos like they were all living some perfect moment. I wanted that mood to swallow me whole. My co-worker Jessa handed me a drink and said I looked like I needed one. I laughed and said she had no idea. She asked if Daniel was still in his quiet phase. I said he'd been stuck in that for months. It felt good to say it out loud, even if it wasn't fully true. I left out the part where I'd stopped talking to him first. After 2 drinks, everything felt lighter. The sunset turned into this deep blue sky that made the city look almost magical. That's when Marco texted me. "Working at the club tonight, come through, first round on me." The message popped up with a little spark of excitement I didn't want to admit I felt. I showed Jessa, and she said I should go because I deserved a night where someone actually paid attention. I rolled my eyes but agreed. I told myself it was harmless, that I just wanted better music. On the walk there, I messaged Daniel that I'd be home late. He replied with, "Okay, let me know if you need a ride." I didn't answer. I didn't want him pacing around waiting for me, asking if I was tired or hungry or ready to leave. I told myself he'd ruin the night with his quiet looks and polite reminders. The club was louder than usual, thick with energy that buzzed right through my skin. Marco spotted me from behind the bar and grinned, like he'd been waiting just for me. He handed me a drink and said, "I look like trouble." I laughed because I liked the way it sounded. He introduced me to a group near the dance floor, and within minutes, I was pulled into the crowd, moving like I didn't have a single responsibility in the world. The music was strong, the lights flashing in warm colors across everyone's faces. People shouted over the beat, raising their phones, capturing everything. At some point, someone shouted that I should get on the table. I don't even remember who it was. Maybe Jessa's friend, maybe one of Marco's regulars. The idea hit me like a dare, and the attention felt too good to refuse. I kicked off my heels, climbed onto the low platform table, and the whole crowd cheered. It happened so fast I didn't stop to think. The lights hit me from every direction, people laughing and filming, and I felt this huge rush like I was finally alive again. I told myself it was just dancing, that anyone would have done the same. One girl yelled that I was iconic, and someone else said my husband must be lucky. I laughed too hard at that, waving it off like some kind of joke. I spun around and almost toppled over, but Marco steadied the table and said I was killing it. I felt bold, loud, the kind of version of myself I thought I'd lost. For a few minutes, I completely forgot about Daniel waiting at home, probably sitting on the couch with the TV volume low, leaving space for me that I wasn't planning to fill. I didn't check the time until my phone buzzed in my hand. A notification read, "Battery low." Behind it was a missed call from Daniel. I ignored it and kept dancing, telling myself I'd call him when I felt like it. The thought that he might be worried only irritated me. Couldn't he let me have one night without hovering? That's what I kept telling myself as I jumped down from the table and pretended not to feel dizzy. We left the club around 2 a.m. The air outside was chilly, but I barely noticed. Marco walked me to the rideshare stand and said he hadn't seen someone light up a room like that in a long time. I said he was exaggerating. He said he wasn't. I liked hearing it more than I should have. I ordered a car and leaned against the railing, feeling strangely powerful and strangely empty at the same time. When I got home, the apartment lights were off except for the lamp in the hallway. Daniel wasn't in the living room. His mug sat clean on the counter, placed far from mine. I washed my face, changed clothes, and crawled into bed without waking him. He didn't move, though I wasn't sure if he was asleep or pretending. I told myself we'd talk in the morning, after he stopped being so sensitive. But morning didn't go the way I expected. I woke up to the smell of coffee but no sign of him. His side of the bed was cold, smoothed out. In the kitchen, a single note lay on the counter. My name at the top, nothing else on the page except one short line. The handwriting was neat, steady, final. It said, "We'll talk soon. I already made the call." I read it 3 times before the meaning hit me. He never mentioned lawyers unless he was serious. He never wrote notes unless he was done arguing. I stood there, gripping the counter, my phone still buzzing with leftover notifications from the night before. I tried to tell myself he was bluffing, that he wouldn't dare make anything official, but the quiet in the apartment felt different, heavy, decided. When my phone lit up with Marco's message, "Last night was wild. Round 2?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the note again, trying to convince myself that everything was still under my control, even as the truth pressed in around me. By Monday morning, I had convinced myself the note didn't mean anything real. Daniel could be dramatic in his own quiet way, and maybe writing it down made him feel powerful. I kept repeating that to myself while doing my makeup, keeping my eyes fixed on my reflection so I wouldn't have to look at the empty side of the bed. I told myself he would cool off once he saw me living my normal life, acting unbothered. If I pretended everything was fine, maybe he would believe it too. When I reached the office, people were already whispering near the elevators. I could tell by the way they glanced at me and then looked away too fast. Jessa rushed over with this half-nervous smile. She said she had seen the clip someone posted from the club. I acted surprised, even laughed, saying the whole thing looked funnier online than in real life. She asked if Daniel was okay with it. I said he needed to learn to take a joke. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. The morning dragged. Every time someone walked past my desk, I wondered if they were thinking about that video. Some pretended not to notice me at all, which honestly felt worse. I checked my phone more times than I want to admit, but Daniel didn't text. Not a single message. Not even a question, asking if I got to work safely, which he always sent, even when we'd argued the night before. The silence worked its way under my skin until I could feel it pulsing. I tried to post something light on social media, just a picture of my coffee with a cute caption. But when I checked an hour later, the The only comments were from people asking if I was okay after Friday. At lunch, the rooftop bar crew asked if I wanted to join them again. I said no, because I didn't want to look like I had something to prove. Instead, I slipped into the small office kitchen and heated up leftovers. While the microwave hummed, my phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had tagged me in the table dance clip. The caption said, "When your friend becomes the main character." I wanted to laugh, but the comment below it made my stomach drop. Her husband looked miserable in the background of her story LOL. I hadn't realized Daniel was in the frame at all. I tapped the video. Sure enough, in one angle from someone's Instagram story, I could see him standing near the bar, expression tight, hands in his pockets. He looked so out of place I almost didn't believe it was him. It felt like someone else's husband, someone I didn't have to care about. Except he was mine, and everyone could see how unhappy he looked. I shut off my phone, shoved it in my pocket, and told myself people were overthinking. When I walked back to my desk, my manager, Rowan, was waiting. He said he needed a quick word. His tone was polite, but too careful. He asked if everything was okay at home. I said yes. He asked if I was comfortable with people posting me online. I said I didn't control what people recorded. He said he understood, but reminded me that certain clips could affect brand image, and our clients sometimes watched employee content. I told him it was outside of work hours, and he said he wasn't questioning my choices, just suggesting awareness. His voice was so calm it annoyed me. I said I didn't need to be lectured over one fun night. He nodded and said he was only trying to help. The conversation left me feeling judged, cornered. After work, I checked my phone again. No messages from Daniel. The last text between us was my "home late" from Friday night. 2 days without a single word from him felt unnatural. I thought about calling, but the idea of him picking up with that quiet, disappointed voice made my chest tighten. I told myself he shouldn't get to make me feel guilty. If he was upset, he should talk, not hide. I decided to walk to the riverside promenade before heading home, just to clear my head. The water looked dull and cold in the early evening light. People walked their dogs, jogged and laughed with friends. I tried to picture Daniel somewhere among them, going for a walk like nothing was wrong, but I couldn't. He wasn't the type to wander when something bothered him. He was the type to fold things, organize things, tuck things neatly away. The image made me uneasy. When I finally got home, the apartment felt too still. I called out his name out of habit, even though I knew he wasn't there. His mug was gone from the counter, which was strange because he usually left it drying by the sink. On the far end of the kitchen, near the fridge, I noticed a tiny red light blinking on the printer. A blank page sat in the tray. The faint smell of toner hung in the air. I told myself he must have been printing something for work, but he rarely printed anything at home. The blinking light felt like some sort of signal I didn't know how to read. I warmed up soup and ate alone at the table, scrolling through comments on my stories. One person asked if Daniel was okay with all that. I almost replied something sarcastic, but stopped myself. Jessa messaged me, asking if things were tense at home. I told her he was being dramatic. She said maybe I should talk to him properly. I said she didn't understand how he shuts down. She said maybe he had a reason. I muted the conversation. When night fell, I went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. His pillow was untouched. He hadn't slept there the night before. I reached for my phone again, staring at the blank space where his name should have appeared. I wanted him to text first, to admit he'd overreacted, to ask if we could talk. I kept checking until my eyes burned. Still nothing. Before I lay down, I walked to the balcony and looked out over the street, half expecting to see his car pull in. Instead, a delivery truck moved past, headlights sweeping over the building across from ours. Down on the sidewalk, 2 people walked by, laughing loudly. I envied them for a moment. At least they weren't waiting for someone who wouldn't answer. Inside, the apartment buzzed softly with the fridge, and the street noise bleeding through the windows. I stared at the printer again. The empty page bothered me more than it should have. It felt like someone had pressed print on something important but hadn't bothered to collect it. Something unfinished. Something I wasn't supposed to see. I crawled into bed, pulling the covers over my legs, and stared at the ceiling until the room blurred. The last thing I thought before drifting off was that Daniel wasn't just upset. He was making choices without me, and I hated how much that scared me. By Wednesday, the silence between us had stretched so long, it felt like another person living in the apartment. I woke to the sound of the front door clicking shut, which meant Daniel had left before sunrise again. His pillow was untouched. His side of the bathroom counter was spotless. Even his towel was missing from the rack. It annoyed me more than it worried me. I told myself he was being petty, trying to prove a point by acting distant. I texted him a simple morning. Hope work isn't too crazy. He didn't reply. I threw my phone on the bed and told myself I didn't care. But the truth was heavier than I wanted to admit. At work, people kept glancing at me like someone had sent out a memo. By mid-morning, the table dance clip was circulating again, now with someone's caption. She really said girls' night energy. A few co-workers laughed when I walked past, but it wasn't the fun kind of laugh. It was tight and quick, like they didn't want me to catch them. I tried to brush it off, but every whisper made my skin prickle. During lunch, I went to the family restaurant near our office, the place with the two bright booths and the plastic menus. I wanted something normal, something familiar. I slid into a booth and was halfway through my meal when a group of people from work walked in. One of them lifted a phone, whispering something to the others. I heard my name. I also heard the words table and husband. My face heated, and I kept my eyes on my soup, pretending not to notice anything. Then, without warning, Daniel walked in. He didn't see me at first. He headed toward the counter to pick up a to-go order. He looked tired but composed, wearing the same neat expression he always had at work. For a second, relief hit me. At least I could finally talk to him. I stood, waving him down. He turned, saw me, and something tightened in his eyes. Not anger, not fear. Something else. Something I didn't recognize. He came over because people were watching. He always hated scenes. I said I hadn't seen him all week. He said he'd been busy. I told him we needed to talk. He said now wasn't a good time. His calm tone grated on my nerves. I told him he couldn't keep avoiding me. He said he wasn't avoiding anything. He was thinking. That word hurt more than shouting would have. Thinking about what? Thinking about us. Thinking about me. Across the room, someone raised their phone, pretending to check messages, but angling the camera toward us. I could tell Daniel noticed. He shifted slightly, enough to turn his face away from them. I hated how embarrassed he looked, as if being seen with me now required effort. I told him people were making the video into a bigger deal than it was. He said he understood. He said the problem wasn't the dance. It was everything around it. I didn't like that answer. I told him he was acting like I'd betrayed him. He said I didn't need to exaggerate things to make myself feel better. The way he said it, calm, low, almost tired, made my stomach twist. Before I could push the conversation further, his phone buzzed. He checked the screen and said he had to go. No explanation, no promise to talk later. Just that quiet tone again, like I was a noise he'd learned to tune out. He grabbed his order and walked out of the restaurant. As he left, one of the people at the other table whispered, "That's rough." Another said, "He doesn't deserve that." I wanted to snap that they didn't know anything about us, but the words jammed in my throat. Instead, I sank back into my seat and stared at the table until the lines blurred. I went home early, telling my supervisor I wasn't feeling well. The apartment felt even emptier than that morning. I opened windows, straightened cushions, wiped counters, anything to make the place feel alive again. It didn't work. I kept listening for the sound of Daniel's keys, his footsteps, his quiet way of clearing his throat when he came home. Nothing. Around 5, my sister Lyra texted asking if she could drop by. I said yes because I needed someone to talk to. When she arrived, she walked into the living room with cautious eyes, like she wasn't sure what she'd find. I tried to make everything sound normal, explaining that Daniel was going through a mood and that people were overreacting about the video. Lyra didn't immediately agree like she usually did. She said it looked pretty bad online, that I'd made him the butt of the joke without meaning to, that she thought maybe he was hurt. I told her Daniel should have told me that instead of disappearing. She said maybe he didn't know how to say it after being embarrassed publicly. I hated that answer. I told her she was taking his side. She said she wasn't. She was just trying to see the whole picture. We almost argued, but she stopped herself and asked if I wanted tea. When she went to the kitchen, she paused at the printer. The blank page from before was still sitting there. She asked if something was stuck. I said Daniel had printed something by accident. She asked what. I said I didn't know. She looked at me for a long moment, and I hated the worry in her face. After she left, the apartment settled into that heavy quiet again. I tried calling Daniel. It went to voicemail. I tried again an hour later. Same. I sent a message saying we needed to talk tonight. He didn't reply. Around 9, I glanced at the hallway and noticed something new. The guest blanket was folded neatly on the spare bed. The door was slightly open. I walked over and saw that the pillow was indented, the sheets drawn tight afterward. He'd slept there. Not once, but maybe several nights. I felt a sharp sting of anger. Why use a different room like he was the one who'd been wronged? I stood there for a long time, staring at the smooth sheets, imagining him lying there on purpose, choosing distance instead of dealing with me. The humiliation of it pressed against my ribs. I told myself he was punishing me, that he wanted me to beg. I told myself he was being dramatic for attention. I told myself anything except the one thought I couldn't handle, that maybe he had already started letting go. I slept badly, waking every time a car passed outside. Each time, I checked my phone, hoping for a message from him. Each time, the screen stayed dark. By the time dawn came, I felt like I hadn't slept at all, and for the first time, a small, unwelcome fear crept into me. Not that he was angry, not that he was distant, but that whatever was happening was only just beginning, and I had no idea what he was planning. By the time Thursday rolled around, the apartment felt less like a home and more like a hotel room someone had already checked out of. I moved around quietly that morning, half expecting Daniel to appear in the doorway and say something, anything, but the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. I made coffee, poured mine into a mug, and set his usual one on the opposite side of the counter out of habit. The distance between them looked bigger than the counter itself. I moved his mug next to mine, then pushed it away again because it felt pathetic. When I got to work, I tried to act normal. I wore a nice blouse, smiled at people, and laughed when one coworker jokingly asked if I planned on behaving this weekend. I told him I always behaved. He didn't laugh. The comment stung more than I let on. By mid-morning, I caught 2 coworkers watching a video on someone's phone and whispering. When they saw me, they quieted instantly, like guilty kids. I walked past them without reacting, but their silence clung to me. At lunch, I considered calling Daniel, but something in me refused to be the first to cave. Instead, I sat in my car in the parking garage, scrolling through my camera roll. I watched the rooftop bar stories again, then the club clips. I tried to see them the way he might have seen them. The bright lights, the cheering crowd, me on that table with my arms up like I didn't have a husband, like I didn't care who watched. I told myself it still wasn't that serious, but a small part of me, one I hated, felt uneasy. When I got home that evening, Daniel's shoes were gone from the entryway. His coat wasn't on the hook. For a moment, I assumed he was out running errands. Then I saw something strange in the living room. A stack of items on the coffee table, neatly arranged. Not messy, not abandoned. Arranged. a water bottle, a notebook, a folded hoodie. All things he normally tossed anywhere. I frowned and walked into the hallway. That's when I heard a noise from the bedroom. Soft movement, something being placed down. I stepped in carefully. Daniel was kneeling beside the bed, sliding one of his portable storage boxes out from under the frame. He didn't look surprised to see me. He didn't look irritated. He looked finished. I asked what he was doing. He said he was organizing things. His voice was so calm it felt unnatural. I told him he didn't usually organize on weekdays. He said he was making space. That made something flip inside my chest. I asked space for what? He didn't answer. He placed a stack of folded shirts into the box and shut the lid. I raised my voice. I said if he wanted attention, he could just talk to me instead of doing all this, whatever this was. He stood, brushed dust from his hands, and said he didn't want attention. He wanted clarity. I snapped that he was blowing everything out of proportion. He said he wasn't blowing anything anywhere. He was sorting. Something about that word made my stomach tighten. Sorting what? Sorting us? Sorting his life? Sorting himself away from me? I followed him into the living room, demanding he explain what was happening. He simply walked past me, opened the coat closet, and reached up to the top shelf. He pulled down a small labeled folder, one I'd never seen before. The label said household sew in neat handwriting. The word looked harmless, but seeing it in his hand made my heart thump too hard. Behind it, tucked under an old stack of winter gloves, was a single USB drive labeled by date. He slipped it into his pocket before I could say anything. I asked what that was. He said, information. Nothing else. I tried to laugh it off, saying he was acting paranoid. He said he wasn't. I said he was overreacting. He said maybe I had underestimated how much he noticed. That shut me up. He brushed past me again and headed for the door. I asked where he was going. He said he needed air. I accused him of leaving to avoid talking. He said talking required honesty from both sides. Something about the way he said it made my face flush, even though I hadn't technically done anything wrong. Not in the way he meant. After he left, I called my mother to vent. She said Daniel was sensitive and had always been a little too proud. She said men like him didn't understand modern relationships, that sometimes wives needed fun without being judged. I agreed loudly, grateful to have someone on my side. But when I hung up, the apartment still felt wrong. A few hours later, Lyra stopped by unannounced. She said she was checking on me, which made me feel judged before she even sat down. I told her things at home were annoying but fine. She asked if Daniel had talked to me at all. I said he would when he was ready. She hesitated before saying that sometimes people don't wait forever. I snapped that she didn't know what she was talking about. She didn't respond. She just stared at the printer again, the blinking light still on. She said maybe he was trying to tell me something in his own way. I told her she was being dramatic. When she left, I tried to settle into the couch and distract myself with a show, but my focus kept slipping. Every sound felt sharp. Twice I thought I heard Daniel's keys in the lock, only for the noise to be a car outside. At one point, I stepped into the hallway and leaned against the wall, listening to the quiet of the apartment. It felt like waiting for a storm I couldn't see. Around 9, the front door opened. Daniel stepped in, calm as ever. He didn't look angry or tired or upset. He just looked sure. I asked if he was finally ready to talk. He said yes, but not in the way I expected. He said he needed to get his thoughts in order first. He opened his laptop and sat at the dining table, typing something I couldn't see. I walked over and asked if he was writing an email. He said it wasn't an email. I asked what it was. He didn't answer. I tried to look at the screen, but he angled it away from me. That was new. I felt a sharp sting of panic. I told him he was being unfair. He said I had called everything unfair for weeks. I told him he couldn't shut me out like this. He said he wasn't shutting me out, he was preparing. Another word I didn't like. I asked preparing for what? He looked up at me, eyes steady, voice calm, and said, "For whatever comes next." Then he closed the laptop and walked to the guest room with that same unbearable calm. When the door clicked shut, the sound echoed through the whole apartment. And for the first time, I felt a cold pull in my chest, like something huge had shifted, and I had no idea how to pull it back. By Friday morning, I'd convinced myself that Daniel's calmness the night before had to be a good sign. People didn't talk like that when they were done. They yelled, slammed doors, threw accusations. But Daniel wasn't doing any of that. He was being measured, quiet, careful. I kept telling myself it meant he was trying to come back to me in his own slow way. Maybe he just needed space. Maybe he would see how ridiculous this whole thing had become. Maybe he would finally say he missed me. When I stepped into the kitchen, he was already there, dressed for work, pouring coffee into his travel cup. He didn't look at me at first. I said good morning. He said morning back, but the word came out smooth, almost practiced. He rinsed his mug, dried it, and set it on the far corner of the counter. I hated how spotless everything around him looked. I hated how it made me feel messy. I asked if we were going to talk. He said yes. He planned to. I asked when. He said soon. I asked if soon meant today. He only shrugged. That shrug set something off inside me. It felt like dismissal, like he'd made some private decision I wasn't invited into. I demanded to know what was going on. He turned off the sink and leaned against the counter, arms crossed. He said he didn't want to talk in the morning because emotions ran too high. I told him emotions wouldn't run high if he would just stop acting like a ghost. He said he wasn't acting like anything. He was being deliberate. I told him deliberate was worse. Deliberate meant distance. Deliberate meant planning. Deliberate meant he was thinking about life without me. He didn't deny it. He just said we'd talk later, then grabbed his keys. On the way out, he paused at the door and said he hoped I'd take today to reflect instead of react. That sentence made my face warm with anger. Reflect on what? I wasn't the one acting strange. I wasn't the one locking drawers or printing blank pages at night. I wasn't the one moving into the guest room like some saint doing me a favor. After he left, I couldn't sit still. I paced the apartment, picking up items and putting them back down. I checked my phone constantly, even though he never texted during work. Jessa messaged me, asking if Daniel had calmed down yet. I wrote that he was being dramatic. She sent a shrug emoji. Even she seemed tired of the story. By mid-afternoon, I felt suffocated. I decided to go for a walk at the community park near our building. The air felt heavy, warm in that early spring way that makes everything stick to your skin. I sat on a bench under a tree and tried to breathe. Kids were playing on the grass. A couple walked past holding hands. I watched them longer than I meant to. That's when Daniel called. I nearly dropped my phone from surprise. I answered quickly, trying to sound calm, light, even cheerful. He said he wanted to talk after work and asked if I could meet him at the park. I said I was already there. He said he'd be by in a few minutes. I stood to meet him when I saw him walking down the path, hands in his pockets, shoulders straight, expression unreadable. He looked composed, in a way that made my stomach twist. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't unsure. He wasn't angry. And that scared me far more than if he'd come in hot. He sat down beside me, leaving a small space between us. I tried to close it by shifting slightly closer, but he didn't move. I asked if he was ready to finally talk. He said yes. His voice stayed low, level, and that made my heart beat too fast. I told him this wasn't just his decision, that I should have a say in whatever he was planning. He nodded but didn't argue. I told him that couples fight, couples struggle, couples make mistakes. He said he agreed. I told him he was acting like I'd done something unforgivable when all I did was let loose for once. He said it wasn't about one night. It was about the pattern, the choices, the way I brushed off his feelings and encouraged people to laugh at him. I said people weren't laughing at him. They were laughing with me. He said that was part of the problem. I told him I needed him to be honest and tell me what he wanted. He said he wanted things handled properly. I didn't like the phrasing. I asked what properly meant. He looked at me for a long moment, then said it meant no more circular arguments, no more pretend fixes, no more rushed apologies. It meant clear steps, clear boundaries, clear outcomes. I said that sounded like something a therapist would say. He said maybe. I asked if he had talked to someone. He said he had talked to the right people. That phrasing made my breath stop in my throat. I asked who. He didn't answer. He just looked at the ground, as if the grass had become more important than anything I was saying. I reached for his hand. He didn't take it. I told him we could still fix things if he would just meet me halfway. He said he'd been doing that for years. I said that wasn't fair. He said fairness depended on honesty, and he didn't think we had much of that left. The word stung. I told him he couldn't talk like that and expect me to stay calm. He said he wasn't expecting calm. He was expecting clarity, and clarity wasn't comfortable. I was desperate by then. I reminded him of trips we'd taken, holidays we'd celebrated, how long we'd been together. He nodded but didn't smile. I said I didn't cheat on him, didn't betray him. He said betrayal came in more shapes than I liked to admit. I asked him directly if he wanted to leave me. The question made him inhale slowly. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He said he wanted resolution, not repetition. I didn't understand what that meant, so I asked again. He stood up instead of answering. He said he had to get back to work. I stood too, demanding he finish the conversation. He looked at me with that calm, unreadable expression and said, "We'll handle this properly." Then he walked away. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady, like he had somewhere important to be, and none of it depended on me. I didn't call after him. My throat was too tight. I watched him leave the park and turn the corner, disappearing behind a row of trees. The wind shifted, rustling the branches, making small shadows dance over the path. When I finally sat back down, I realized my hands were shaking, not from anger, from something closer to fear. The kind that comes when you realize you've pushed someone too many times and they finally stopped pushing back. I stayed there until the sunlight thinned into early evening. Every so often, I'd check my phone, hoping he'd message something, anything to soften what he'd said. But the screen stayed dim. The walk home felt longer than usual. When I reached our building, I looked up at our window. The light was off. The apartment was quiet. The world was quiet, and for the first time, I understood that Daniel wasn't threatening me. He was warning me. Saturday felt strangely bright for how heavy my chest felt. I woke early, expecting the usual silence from the guest room, but the door was already wide open. The bed was neatly made, pillow smoothed, blanket folded. Daniel's shoes were gone. His coat was gone. Even the small stack of items he'd left on the coffee table had disappeared. It looked like he had erased himself from the apartment overnight. I told myself not to panic. He said he wanted to handle things properly. Maybe he meant a long talk, a real plan, some kind of structure we never had before. Maybe he'd realized he was being dramatic. Maybe he just needed to cool off. I kept repeating those maybes while I showered and dressed, choosing clothes that made me look calm and in control. A soft blouse, clean jeans, simple earrings. I told myself I would see him today, and everything would finally make sense. When I stepped into the kitchen, there was a faint smell of coffee. His mug was gone, but he'd left the machine clean. That tiny detail made my throat tighten. It felt like a goodbye, even though I refused to believe that. I drank my coffee standing up, staring at the spot where his mug used to sit. Around noon, I couldn't sit still anymore. I texted him asking where he was. No reply. I called, straight to voicemail. I paced the apartment until I felt caged. Then I decided to go find him. Not in a desperate way, I told myself, just in a reasonable adult way. Couples needed closure before making decisions. I figured he might be at work. His office tower was only a 15-minute walk away. I could catch him during lunch, ask him to sit with me, talk somewhere neutral. I grabbed my bag and left the apartment, locking the door carefully, as if locking it slowly could somehow keep everything from breaking. The city was busy, full of weekend errands and traffic. People passed me holding iced coffees and shopping bags, laughing with friends or tapping through their phones. I envied how normal they all looked, how unbothered their lives seemed. I kept checking my own phone with every step, waiting for a buzz that didn't come. When I reached the office tower, the lobby was fuller than usual. A few employees stood near the elevators chatting. A security guard rolled a cart of packages toward a side hallway. The marble floor shone under the bright lights, and the large glass doors reflected everyone in sharp shapes. I paused, fixing my hair in the reflection, trying to look composed. Daniel wasn't in sight, but I saw his co-worker Jana walking toward the elevators. I waved. She hesitated before coming over. Her smile looked cautious, like she wasn't sure if she should say it was good to see me. I asked if Daniel was upstairs. She said softly that he might be around, but her tone made it sound like she knew something I didn't. Before I could ask more, the elevator dinged, and she stepped inside quickly. I took a breath and walked deeper into the lobby. I hoped he'd come down soon. I rehearsed what I'd say, that things got out of hand, that we needed to reset, that I never meant to humiliate him, that we could work through whatever he thought needed fixing. My chest tightened with every word I planned. Then I saw him. He stepped out of the far elevator like he was walking into a completely normal day. Shirt neatly pressed, expression calm, hands at his sides. He saw me. He didn't flinch. He didn't smile either. He approached but stopped several steps away, giving me space like I was a co-worker, not his wife. I started toward him, but before I reached him, someone else approached me from the left. A man in a dark jacket, clipboard in hand. I assumed he was a building employee until he said my name. My full name, quiet but clear. I nodded before thinking. He confirmed my identity again, then held out an envelope. Thick, sealed, official looking even before I touched it. For you, he said. You've been served. The words didn't make sense at first. My brain refused to connect them to me. I stared at the envelope like it was a prank. I shook my head and said there must be some mistake. People in the lobby slowed, turning to look. I felt their eyes like heat on my skin. I said I didn't understand. The man just nodded politely, then walked away as if he'd handed me a menu instead of whatever this was. I turned to Daniel, heart hammering. I asked what this was. He didn't look away. He said, steady and quiet, that it was the proper next step. His voice didn't shake. Mine did. I asked if he was serious. He said he'd been serious for a long time. I just hadn't noticed. My fingers trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside were documents, pages and pages, a notice of separation, temporary financial arrangements, a request that all communication be documented moving forward, phrases I couldn't process fast enough, words that blurred together into something sharp. I looked up at him, searching for anger, for heartbreak, for anything that could make this feel like a fight I could win. But Daniel wasn't angry. He wasn't broken. He was resolved. Calm in a way that terrified me. I said he didn't have to do this publicly. He said he wasn't hiding anymore. I accused him of blindsiding me. He said he wasn't. He had been giving me signs for weeks. I wanted to say that wasn't fair, that he should have told me directly. But then I remembered the note, the boxes, the blank page, the way he kept saying properly, the way he looked at me at the park. Maybe he had told me, just not in the language I wanted. People nearby pretended not to stare. Someone whispered. Jana stepped out of the elevator again and froze when she saw what was happening. I felt heat crawl up my neck. I tried to speak, but the words came out dry and thin. I said we could still talk about this. He said we would, just not like before. Not in circles, not in fragments. He said clear steps made things easier for both of us. I hated how calm he sounded. I hated how steady his hands looked. I hated how small I felt in the bright echo of the lobby. I wanted to scream, to demand he undo this, to ask why he gave up on us without giving me one more chance. But the truth sat heavy in my throat. He hadn't given up suddenly. He'd given up slowly, quietly, one careful decision at a time. I stepped closer. He didn't step back, but he didn't reach for me either. He looked at me like someone signing off on a chapter. Not cruel, not cold, just done. The envelope bent slightly in my hand as I gripped it too hard. My voice cracked when I asked if this was really happening. He nodded once, a small, final motion, and then he walked past me, heading toward the doors. Sunlight spilled into the lobby as he stepped outside. He didn't look back. I stayed frozen where I was, people moving around me, like I was a statue in the middle of the floor. I held the papers tight against my chest because my hands had nothing else left to hold. The door shut behind him with a soft final click,